Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Talent Board Candy Awards Research Benchmark Program Awards and Ceremony. We're here with Tony Suzda and Jenna Winkle. I'll introduce them in a second, but our session is really around covering using candidate manager, hiring manager feedback, recruiter feedback to help diagnose and optimize your talent acquisition processes from hello all the way to hire. And we can go beyond, but we're really going to focus today on the hello to hire portion. Moving to the slide here. So as I said, we have Tony Suzda. He's the Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition at Dent. Welcome, Tony, and thank you for joining us. And we have Jenna, the Talent Candidate Experience Specialist at Workiva. Both are Talent Board Candy Award winners. Jenna, your organization, Workiva, has won it 3 years in a row now. Huge, congratulations. And I know you guys keep climbing the ladder. And Tony, this is your second year of participating with the Dent Wizard and the research and awards ceremony. And you guys are also two-time winners, two in a row. Congratulations, and thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
So our agenda today is, talking a bit about candidate experience and where kind of it started. And you guys I'm going to ask you some questions and you're going to share some stories. And then we're going to go through what we are introducing as stage-based or step feedback, kind of pulsing along the way through all the different talent acquisition process. And then we're going to ask you guys to give us some examples, maybe like some use cases around hiring managers. And, we continually hear at Survale when we talk to prospects and clients that hiring managers, there's this void there. There's just my gut feeling tells me there's something wrong. And so maybe we can kind of dive into that and how feedback has been used to align them and, really align your candidates, talent acquisition team and your managers to just make a better outcome. And then, we'll talk about some of the things that, we can actually diagnose by using, the Survale impact, like feedback throughout the different talent acquisition stages. And then we'll look into some of your metrics that you guys are covering. Like obviously everyone's talking about the candidate net promoter score now. And I'll just touch on that briefly. At Survale, we believe a candidate net promoter score is really every single interaction you have with a candidate. The aggregate measurement of all those interactions is your candidate net promoter score. It's not enough just to say, if I survey a candidate on my career site and grab a net promoter score from there, that's my true candidate net promoter score, because it's really not. That candidate may have stopped there. Maybe that for that one particular candidate, that's what it is. But, as candidates flow through phone screens with recruiters and interviews with managers, these are all influenced and all those experiences vary, and you need to be aware of what's going on there. So we'll just talk a bit about that kind of stuff, and we'll talk about results and some. I've got a couple of extra slides in at the end. So I think we can talk a bit about the strategic management of some of this feedback and how the analytics really come to life. So, moving along onto our next slide here, and I'm going to put my notes. So, with candidate experience, years ago, it really started out, this candidate experience talk, and really where it started was. Candidates, when they're applying for positions on your corporate career sites, there are certain applicant tracking systems out there that had a very lengthy, painful application process. And candidates would literally spend 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, punching in all the information, a lot of data, only to hit submit. And you know what happens? It blew up, or I get an error, I can't submit, and what a frustrating experience. And that we used to monitor, like, chat feeds and so forth. What we would see is candidates saying, like, look, I will never apply to an organization that is running that. I'll look at the URL in the browser, and I'll never apply to a company that is using that applicant tracking system. And it happened for a bunch of them out there. And so that's kind of the kind of some of the early pioneer days of this brewing of candidate experience. And candidate experience is as important as customer experience and client experience, because the candidate experience ultimately is responsible for building your entire employer brand. And what is your employer brand responsible for? It's building that pipeline, that talent pipeline of good quality candidates. So everything you can do to build your employer brand and make it positive and shine great will begin to attract good quality talent, which then is responsible for that pipeline coming in and hiring great strategic employees. So that's kind of what I think. And so along the way, with candidate experience, the talent board rose up, and they started doing these annual benchmarks and research. And so you had some early wins out there. Understanding people would send out the surveys as they do today, and benchmark and research, and they come back, they analyze the feedback and try to figure out what's going on, and you get some early wins and fix some blind spots. So with that, I would love to hear from both of you guys, and maybe Jenna, maybe you don't want to start first this time. What was kind of the first light bulb that goes off going, we need to start looking into this candidate experience, and what drove Workiva to start caring?
It actually was a very big light bulb moment for our team when there was just some new leadership that had come in, and as a part of their new quest to get our team kind of aligned and headed the same direction, we did this large project of basically mapping the TA process out on a whiteboard. So we physically drew out all of the different points, the recruiter points, the manager points, the candidate points, everything that we were dealing with in talent acquisition, to help us internally as a talent acquisition team identify problem areas with our processes, with our company's processes, and that really started to give light into some of these problems we weren't even thinking about from a candidate experience. So I very distinctly remember bubbling up on the whiteboard of when these candidates get into these waiting pools or these black holes that we know about for the candidates for candidates applying and then never hearing back from anyone. How are we addressing that as a company? And that just kind of hung out there as a question mark. And then there were different other mile markers along this journey that we were mapping out as a team that started to kind of all align with that candidate experience question and inquiry about what was going on there. What are we doing? Are we doing well? And it was right at that time, towards the end of 2017, that we actually engaged with Survale, and it was kind of it was a perfect solution for us, for considering we had all these questions and we didn't know how we were doing, but we knew it was potentially problematic, and we wanted to start engaging with our candidates and understanding how we were doing. And so we were able to lean in and engage with Survale and start measuring that.
That's great. So it wasn't particularly understanding what your candidate net promoter score was at the beginning. That's something you track now, obviously.
Yep.
But yeah, there was other drivers. What was driving you to start we need to focus on this?
Yeah.
That's cool. Hey, Tony, what was the kind of your guys' driver and
Yeah, when I joined Dent Wizard, I was kind of looking at different technologies and different things we could put in place. I often joked around that we were, behind the times by about, 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years when I got here.
Yeah.
But I was at RNL and I met this like-minded individual named Jason. It was actually you. We just started talking, and as you and I started having conversations about, well, what are you seeing? And, well, that's important. And well, what if we looked at it this way? And we started thinking and, started talking about all the different things. And again, it kind of started out with, you were talking about these long application processes.
Yeah.
And, we started looking at all the different things that Dent Wizard had in place that were like, well, there's a bottleneck. Okay. There's obviously a point where somebody's not clicking through. There's a point where someone's probably not having a good experience. And that became just, I don't want to call it an obsession, but it became an obsession of mine of going, we have to fix this. And as you know, we didn't sign up for the Candy Awards the first year or two that we were doing candidate experience, because It was more for me about getting it right and getting the candidate experience changed over for NetWizard. So that was kind of the aha moment, was just in conversations. It just happened to be with you that, we had things we needed to change. And it was, it became evident when I started looking back at what the data was.
So chalk went up for Jason's sales skills.
Yes.
Joking. That's great. Thanks, Tony. So Jenna, I know your organization has actually carved out roles for candidate experience. And we're starting to see our prospects carving out roles for candidate experience, or they already have it, a talent experience, people experience. Tony, have you guys carved out anything like that right now, or?
It's just part of my job.
Part of your job. Okay. So it's a piece of the pie of Tony's role. But Jenna, I think you guys have a pretty interesting kind of story you can tell about your candidate experience roles.
Yeah. Again, back to that end of 2017 time when we just started to really understand, like, oh my gosh, I think we're missing something here. And we wanted to start considering the experience of the candidate. Didn't really know that candidate experience was such a catchphrase at the time, but as we started stepping into that, we really felt like who at the time, myself, my role, and there was one other person on our team who had a role of talent acquisition coordinator. And so we very strategically and very intentionally chose to rename that role as a candidate experience coordinator to put forth, to put it out there to the candidates. We're the ones doing the primary communication with the candidates, asking for their availability, getting them scheduled, getting their travel booked, et cetera. We were constantly communicating back and forth, and we received we're grateful for the fact that we received really good feedback right away. Like, oh, that's so cool that you have candidate experience coordinators. Like, it was just a good way for us to demonstrate, in addition to the surveys that we were sending to the candidates, like, hey, we focus on candidate experience. We want to know how we're doing. We actually had designated roles for that. So yeah, we switched the talent acquisition coordinators to candidate experience coordinators. And now that team has grown. And so now we have a candidate experience specialist, myself, who then runs a team of candidate experience coordinators. So yeah, it continues to be a focus for us.
That's so great. So like, technology aside, like, what other, like, I hear about companies when a candidate flies into their town, they go to the hotel, they have a meet and greet from the airport, they have potentially, it's somebody who's lost bag, they'll have, clothes delivered. Like, outside that whole scenario, like, are there other candidate experience kind of things you think about, like, beyond like the technology and that you guys do?
Ours is really providing in some of those downtimes as a candidate where candidates are just in that weird waiting period, is providing them with that information that they're hungry for without having them to ask for it. So that includes both travel, but also just early stages of candidate experience. So when someone is researching Workiva for the first time, what information can we provide them? Being able to map out, if they did apply, what would their candidate experience look like, so they know exactly what they're getting themselves into. Moving to an application process where they can see that progress bar as they move through the application, so they know there's only 2 steps left, 1 step left, and they're getting closer and closer. And then other side of the coin, like when they are traveling, we've made these really awesome PDFs of like, what is it going to be like to visit the Ames office or the Amsterdam office or the Scottsdale office, with live links to the coolest coffee shops and the coolest bars in the area, to make their experience the best it can be.
That's perfect. Tony, you guys have anything going on like that?
Our big thing right now has been putting together some videos or walkthroughs of the office. With our office now open, we put together some walkthroughs of, this is what office life is like at Dent when the office is open. And giving them maybe a short video of our culture, the meetings that we have, like the tech meetings that we have, the types of, celebrations that we do, the chili cook-off, that kind of stuff. Just showing them that, this stuff does exist, and we'll get back to it just as soon as we can.
Yeah, that's great. Especially because, people that you're hiring right now, they don't know what that office life looks like.
Right.
Very different, isn't it? I mean, we're all doing this virtual work from home and virtual hiring, virtual onboarding. And you know, that's tough in itself. And you know, organizations now are adapting, but you know, when it is time to come back to the office, if we go back to the offices, like in some cases we won't, you know, what's that life look like? And you know, that's great. That's a good idea about creating those videos. So I've moved on to the next slide here, and I want to just kind of take a step back because, you know, a lot of organizations, this is what we normally see with enterprise organizations like yours. So before they start using a product that does stage-based feedback, typically what organizations will do is they'll once a quarter or every like month, if they can, they'll go into their ATS, they'll extract all the hired candidates that they've just hired in the last 90 days, put them in a CSV file, upload them to some kind of survey tool, blast out a survey, and hope and pray stuff comes back. As it rolls back, they export it, put it into an Excel spreadsheet, start doing all their pivot tables, analyzing and trying to figure out what's going on. And then what we're introducing with Survale is step-based feedback, stage-based feedback, status-based feedback. It's all the same, but it's really from when we say hello to hire, you know, the hello is really for us, it's the what's that career site experience like, you know, digital experience. And, you know, so pre-applicant experience, right? You know, start surveying those candidates on your career site because one, you know, if they're having problems, it's a way for them to communicate with you. You know, as simple as uploading their resume to their application. You know, if they're having problems with the zip code, postal code, I know that's happened with Tony at Dent Wizard doing some recruiting in Canada. I mean, they'll tell you that. As well as, you know, pre-applicant experience, it's a great way to do some research on your employer brand, you know, your brand affinity. Like, you know, what's your perception of us as an employer? How likely are you to tell friends and colleagues about our opportunities, or how was searching our career site? Did you find everything you're looking for? Like stuff that we're talking about here. And that's a little bit of that's the kind of the first experience, candidate experience. And then we move into the second area where we you know, candidates have found a position or requisition, they've applied to it, and hopefully they're starting to go through, you know, the various processes that you have in your talent acquisition. So things like just as simple as application feedback, but really, you know, moving into those human interactions and, you know, your talent acquisition teams with phone screens and video screens and, you know, these online meetings, understanding the feedback, manager feedback, you know, when a candidate has interviewed with a manager, and then if you're having declined offers, and you know, how could we have positioned ourselves better so that you would have accepted that offer, finding and diagnosing those kinds of issues, or you know, and then on the flip side, you know, if they accept your offer, like what was your deciding factor? Like these are important things to replicate for the future candidates. And then obviously benchmarking and all that kind of stuff. And then moving into post-hire, we also, you know, we want to gather hiring manager feedback, recruiter feedback about the internal process, how communicating between our teams was, like did you see enough candidates, quality of candidates, was the diversity there, you know, like understanding like what the recruiting process looks like is really important, as well as, hey, are our managers, are they responding to us fast enough? And, you know, maybe there's a bottleneck there. So that kind of stuff. Then we move into employee experience, which we're not going to get into today, but I just wanted to put these up there. You know, maybe, hey, so I'll go with Jenna. Jenna, do you want to kind of touch on some of the areas that you guys gather feedback on, and then we'll go to Tony and touch on some of the areas. Like, I know you're not doing all of these, but you know, you're probably doing a lot of them and starting to think about other ones. So I'll just kind of turn it over to you to discuss what you do.
Yeah, we have 6 ongoing surveys, and that's not to mention we do a variety of other like ad hoc surveys, but we'll talk about the 6 ongoing surveys. 4 of them are candidate facing, and then 2 of them are internal. So walking chronologically through the candidate experience, we have our always on, which is on the career site. Again, that's the pre-apply. They don't even necessarily have to be a candidate, but we get that pop up like a 30-second survey. It's like 5 questions. The next potential survey they would receive is following a 24 hours after they have a phone screen with a recruiter. They'll get a survey inquiring about their interaction with the recruiter and their satisfaction, overall experience of scheduling. And again, we ask their NPS at every single one of these so we can see how it changes and shifts for the candidate as they engage with us further. The third potential survey they receive is after hiring team interaction. So if they meet with the hiring team and then they're rejected, Survale recognizes, oh, this person was rejected and they just recently met with, maybe it was just the hiring manager, or maybe they made it all the way through to final. But if they either got to rejected or offer accepted and they had done some sort of interaction with the hiring team, they get that third survey saying, hey, you've interacted with the hiring team. How was it? What was it like? Were they prepared? Did they know about the role? Did they answer all your questions? Again, NPS at that stage. And then the fourth and final potential survey we send out to a candidate is that declined offer survey. I love that survey. And that one I often find myself turning around and sending stuff maybe to our benefits team on feedback that they got as to why that their offer wasn't accepted, or maybe back to the hiring manager, the recruiter, of like, hey, no, this is a hard negotiation, ended up being the deciding factor as to why that person didn't come. But that's one of my favorites. So those are our 4 candidate facing surveys. And then real quick, the 2 internal surveys that we do right after a hire is made, we send a survey to the hiring manager asking about their experience with talent acquisition. And that actually rolls up into our recruiter KPIs as far as how the managers are rating their recruiters and how they did. And then the second one also goes to the hiring managers, but it's timed out 90 days after the start date of the employee, asking, would you hire this person again? How are they doing on these particular qualifications of the job? And so we get a little bit more of that like quality of hire type of metric.
Yeah, that quality of hire one is huge. Most organizations, like, they define their own quality of hire, but this is one way that you can actually gather some feedback from the person that is a direct reports and gather this feedback and say, like, how likely are we to hire this person? Are they culturally fitting in? Do they have the skills that we thought that this person had? Like, that quality of hire report is huge. It's so nice to see you doing that. And then for the NPS question, Jenna, what is the NPS question that you guys kind of use consistently throughout all your pulses that you do?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to refer a friend, family, or colleague to apply at Workiva or to work at Workiva?
Yeah, and then you're able to take basically all your stages and their NPS scores and see where you have issues on a high level. I guess that's,
if it dips or if it's if it elevates at a particular level, it's good to see.
Yeah, and then I guess that's probably some of the metrics that your C-level management team would like to see in their quarterly business reviews, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Hey, Tony, how about you? What coming back to the steps that we're gathering feedback, do you want to touch on what steps?
I can't sound real unique here because we're set up very similar to Jenna. So we have the always on survey, which, is probably one of them that I get the most candid feedback from. It's probably one of my favorites to look at when I'm talking about process and what people are thinking. We launched a new career site with new branding last year, or I'm sorry, the beginning of this year. And so it's been very helpful in that and in what people like and don't. Our second survey would be the one that goes out post application. So that's a little bit different than what Jenna's doing. So we have a survey that goes out right after they apply. So we really want to capture those people that are telling us, candid information, even if they didn't apply. And then we want to capture all the people that do apply. Right. And then we have another one that goes out post interview. So that covers the conversation with both the recruiter and the manager. Our interviews tend to happen pretty quick. So one survey is able to encompass both the work with the recruiter and the time with the manager.
Right.
And we like Jenna, have a survey that goes out to our managers asking about the recruiter experience. It rolls up into our standards of success for the recruiters and all that. And I even incentivize the recruiters from time to time on, exceptional scores or exceptional feedback. And then we also do kind of post hire 30, 60, 90, 180 day, but we do tie in information in those back to candidate experience and mainly asking, so in what you were told or what you experienced when you were a candidate pre-hire, how do you feel things measure up? How do you feel the benefits measure up to what you were told? How do you feel that the the role measures up to what was explained to you. And so that's important feedback for us to get as well, because it's definitely more candid.
Great. So one of the questions I have for both of you, you're both surveying your managers post-hire. How many questions do you find your managers can tolerate?
I'll start. For me, it's about 5.
Okay, that's huge, actually.
Yeah.
I think ours is 5, maybe 7 max.
Okay.
I know there's the matrix questions get a little wonky because it's like one question, but you actually have to select like 3 or 4 things.
It feels like it's only one question because you're on
Yeah,
one.
but it only looks like one question.
It's
So
only-
yeah, right about there for our managers.
That's great. And to get that manager buy-in, did you just go ahead and sprinkle these surveys out to them without notifying them, or did you have management communicate that this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing?
I'll start with this one. I would say we didn't do it well the first time, only because I don't think we really understood how hungry the managers were going to be for this feedback.
Yeah.
And so once we had our first set of like, the particular example was we were getting feedback and real live feedback in time with when the on-sites were still taking place, that the on-sites were too long for these candidates. And we had heard this kind of resounding feedback of like, it was a great on-site, had great questions. However, it was 4 hours and it felt like I was asked the same question every 30 minutes for 4 hours. And I feel like it could have been cut in half. Yeah. After we saw a couple of those, we delivered it back to the hiring manager. And I'm sure as many of you aren't surprised, the recruiter had already provided this feedback to the manager, but that holds nothing to the manager until it comes from the candidates. And so we had came back to the manager saying, hey, we're getting some feedback from candidates that this is their experience. We'd really encourage maybe you shifting this back. And their response was immediate. And also their excitement for like, wait, you're getting feedback from candidates. We didn't know this. And then they just became super hungry to always know what was that feedback that they were getting. Was it good? Was it bad? What do they need to change? And, we kind of chuckle about it. It's like, yeah, we told you it was too long, but it doesn't matter if recruiting tells you it's too long. It matters if the candidate tells you it's too long. So we should have positioned it better in hindsight to the managers, because I think they would have gotten super excited in a positive way. And I was just kind of after the fact that they found out that we were doing these surveys.
Yeah.
But it all shook out just fine.
Okay. So, and you have good response rates?
We have really good response rates. Yeah. Increasing in, as you might imagine, as the candidates get more engaged in the process, our response rates get even better.
Yeah. That's very, very common. And that's what we see with all of our clients. Tony, did you guys have to do like any buy-in from management, or just
we knew that it was going to be one of those things that it was going to be accepted with both, that's a great idea, and fear a little bit, because you have those managers out there that are self-aware that they're not the best interviewers. It's interesting because we have over 100 hiring managers that don't always have openings. And we hire new ones all the time. So I find myself having to remind managers sometimes that, I'll give them feedback and they'll be like, well, how did we get this? And I'll be like, if you remember, we survey our candidates to get this feedback. Oh, we do? So, I mean, it's a constant reminder, but they generally embrace it. And, and in the times that they don't, it's usually instances where we needed to get involved for interview, extended interview training, or I need to bring in somebody higher level to help out that manager, just because of some instances where they're not giving a good experience. And so they may not like that, but when they have 20% more candidates and are able to make hires, 15 to 20 days faster, they're going to appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, what we're starting to see as well is some easy wins by doing like stage-based feedback is, just like understanding like, well, wait a second, we need actually to make sure all of us are going through all the different steps, not skipping from apply to hire in our ATS. I mean, did you guys experience any kind of easy wins like that using like this kind of feedback, step-based feedback to help diagnose issues? Well, you can only diagnose those issues if you actually have a good process internally, right? And obviously you two have a great process because you can do this. But, early days, did you have to do any fine tuning?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tony.
Go ahead.
You go first.
Yes, we did a little bit. We experienced, the processes and things. And like I said, early on, we had that always on survey telling us, well, maybe this part of the process is being skipped over. Somebody was saying, I only saw, or I got I got a survey, or I was told I was going to do the survey and I never did. We asked the recruiters to make sure that they're reminding candidates that this is stuff that's going to be coming down the pipeline for them, and it's important. So we were finding out where it wasn't happening. But once it was ingrained in the process, and because it is so automated, it really didn't take long for it to just take off.
That's great. Yeah.
And I don't see anybody trying to skip over anything.
That's good.
To avoid a survey, which is awesome.
That's good. Jenna, did you guys have to do any tuning of your process?
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know that we needed to change the process, but I think we needed to increase adherence to the existing process.
Okay.
And I think the recruiters, for example, knowing that they were hungry for that feedback, they wanted to know how they were doing. And so tangible example is, instead of them maybe skipping the documentation of the fact that they had a 10-minute, 15-minute screen with a candidate, maybe they were proactively searching, they had that conversation, and they normally would have just put them right to hiring manager interview. They actually wanted to go back into the ATS and document we had a screen, because they knew that that was going to trigger the survey. And if they didn't do that, they weren't going to get the feedback from that candidate on their own performance. And so I would say the process was there, but the surveys and the feedback the surveys were providing were almost like this little carrot for the recruiters to start abiding a bit more by the process that was already out there.
And that's so good, because obviously that's a sign of a good recruiter. Like, so I think somebody that's not doing a good job, as Tony said, I don't necessarily want to see that feedback. I don't want to trigger it. But now you've got people going, you know what? I want this third party feedback, because now maybe we're tracking recruiter metrics and manager metrics, and every individual recruiter can have their own candidate net promoter score, which theoretically could move into, compensation and increases on your annual reviews and performance management. So, do either of you kind of move and tie that kind of performance to compensation at all, or benefits?
We do. Like I said, I mentioned earlier, our recruiter KPIs. And so we take a couple metrics out of Survale in addition to several other metrics across from our ATS, but those tie into performance-based bonuses for recruiters.
Oh, that's unreal. That's great. I love that.
Yeah. We have what's called the standards of success, and there are certain things, certain goals that our recruiters have to hit, and we've tied those in much to their KPIs and to the standards of success, and incentivize them. And sometimes it's a bonus too. I'll go out and I'll say, hey, the best overall score this week or this month is going to get $100 or something like that. So it's to do well. And we've even gone as far now to sometimes we have managers set their most important tasks, the MITs for the month. And we've had instances where managers have either been deficient or maybe even mediocre in their interviewing or their feedback from their interviews. And it's been a most important task or an MIT that they need to correct that. And so then we're pulling and feeding that data down to say, did they succeed or did they not?
Right. That's good. Well, I love hearing that. I just realized I've been stuck on the same slide for about 20 minutes. And I've probably covered every other slide along the way. But let me just go through and maybe we move into the hiring managers, which we've been talking a lot about, aligning managers and gathering feedback. And, what this has really become is, data-driven decisions, right? What we continually hear from our clients and prospects is, we always knew there was some issues with our hiring managers. It's not all hiring managers, but there's a few that don't know how to interview. Maybe we don't really know that, but they say they do. Or what are they doing in those interviews? And you always had a gut feeling about maybe a couple, right? But it was difficult to go and say, hey, I think you need to sharpen your pencil, as a director of talent acquisition, to go talk to the hiring manager. So now all of a sudden you have this third party feedback coming back from candidates, and suddenly you have 40 candidates telling you, John's not prepared, right? Or he's not knowledgeable about the role. He doesn't understand what this company does. It empowers you guys to be able to go back to John and say, look, this isn't me. This is 40 candidates saying this. And so do you guys have any kind of great examples, like, from feedback from candidates where you were able to take and realign some managers and,
Yeah, for us, it happens all the time. I mean, I was just going through mine this morning, and if I had a manager that I don't know, hasn't really had many issues, but maybe she was just having an off day. But there were 2 or 3 not great experiences in there, and we're lucky enough that one candidate left really detailed comment. So I'm not happy that I have to give negative feedback. I'm excited that, hey, I can go in there and give definitive reasons on, hey, this is what you can do. We can correct this. We can turn this around today. Yeah. Let's, here's the points. So
that's good. Jenna, do you have any examples on?
Yeah, I gave the example earlier on like shortening, for example, just shortening the hiring team's experience. We had one manager that really thought it was like a strategy to just keep asking the candidate every 30 minutes with a new set of people. They would ask them the same questions. Sure. And like, we're like, that doesn't make any sense. But I don't know if they're looking for consistency or lack of consistency or what. But right. Again, that was an example of like, it didn't come great coming from recruiting, but then once we started to get that on documentation from the candidates, that it was kind of a weird experience, that they felt like the interview team was actually ill prepared because they kept asking the same question. The candidate, the hiring manager turned around and changed their behavior immediately because they didn't think that was how the candidates were perceiving it. And once we had that literally written down by several candidates who went through their experience, it's a game changer in how they respond.
I have an example of another client, and they operate in the APAC, EMEA, North America, and India. And they were looking at their performance, and they had a real problem in one of their regions. And that one particular region, they had difficulty building a pipeline of candidates. And then when they did build the pipeline, it was a weak talent pool of candidates. And then when they actually meant to make an offer, candidates were declining, but all the other regions were performing really well. And so we went in and took a look at the analytics inside Survale for their account, and it basically what it did, we just clicked on a few things like negative feedback from interviews with managers, and it pinpointed 3 or 4 managers. And when we were on a call discussing and looking at the analytics, there was this huge pause on the phone call, and it was the next words were, I knew it. Because we could see like which managers were associated with the negative feedback. It was funny at the time, but in reality, 3 managers ruining an entire region's employer brand is significant on an organization's bottom line and way to perform. So long story short, they didn't go and retrain everybody. They just retrained those 3 managers on how to interview, be prepared, knowledgeable about the roles, and how to be respectful of people's time. And anyhow, like within 6 months, that entire region was almost ahead of one of the other regions as far as satisfaction from candidates in their interviews. Like, what a turnaround. And that's a fast turnaround, and that's actionable data, right? And I mean, it doesn't get any better than like little success stories like that. So anyhow, thanks for sharing those. I'm going to move along again. So so we've been talking kind of in and out of all this. We're gathering feedback from candidates primarily, and we're able to diagnose different issues throughout the process. Then we're gathering feedback from managers, one about our internal process and how satisfied we are in working together, but 2, also gathering feedback from managers, 30, 90, whatever cadence, about the quality of hire. And then now we're also seeing organizations moving into recruiter feedback on managers, as well, and recruiter feedback from candidates, and candidates on recruiters and so forth. So I know we've talked a lot about this, and that you guys are doing all of these, and you're doing a great job at it. So and then again, all these measurements start to collectively bring that aggregate candidate net promoter score. So you're going to have a very broad-based candidate net promoter score that you can bring to your management team on your QBR meetings, quarterly business meetings, or you can get very granular, as Jenna, you're saying, and Tony, you're saying, that you can actually have recruiter candidate net promoter scores, and then moving into compensation based off of that. You can have candidate net promoter scores for divisions and regions, and so it's an endless kind of way to analyze and slice and dice. So part of I think what sets Survale apart is from your traditional surveying, where you just go out and survey candidates and experience data comes back, is the ability to bring in operational fields from your systems, like your applicant tracking systems, right? And I think that's kind of been some of our secret sauce for you guys in really pinpointing and diagnosing where you have issues. And so maybe you guys can just talk about like how you use some of the data, how we blend the data together, experience data and operational data. Like, when you go and analyze, Jenna, and you go inside the Survale product in your account, like what are the things you do? You drill in, like what do you drill in on?
So the different facets that I look at right off the base are often recruiter. I also can separate like interns versus full-time. So we'll want to pull out, sometimes we'll want to exclude intern.
12 o'clock.
They can be like overzealous sometimes on their metrics, and they're like just super excited they got an interview. So we can take off intern or pull in only intern. We will take it by department sometimes, and then we'll even go department and then layer in location. So like engineering in Ames versus engineering in Scottsdale. And then I would say most popular for us lately is really looking at how our EMEA offices are performing against our US offices. That's our main focus in recruiting this year, is over in EMEA. And so just seeing like what are our areas of opportunity between how our US candidates are experiencing our recruiting process versus our EMEA, and then sooner APAC. And so we're able to, based on those regions or what we have them identified as different companies, so I can look at just Workiva Netherlands versus Workiva France versus Workiva Germany and see how those companies are, I don't want to say competing, but lining up against each other in certain facets of the data that's coming in.
Great. Understand the trends of different locations, so forth. Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
Tony, how do you when you jump in and how do you look at these fields and use them?
Yeah, I mean, I get pretty granular into the recruiter and then the manager, and you showed that table before, kind of by the what we call our zones, but I think it's divisions. It's I want to look and see. So the way we're set up, you've got regions, and within a region you have districts, and then you have zones. And I like look down and see, okay, what are the three managers in this zone? What's their score? What's the entire district or the entire regions? It's interesting how excited our regional vice presidents have gotten over that data, and kind of seeing the almost competitiveness, which is not an uncommon thing for Dent Wizard. Look at this during our Q meetings. We've almost talked about giving out an award because that would just go that far. For like the top region for their, the best manager interviews or the best interview experience. So it's something we'll look at doing, definitely, being a 2-year winner now with the candies. I think I'd like to share that, internally. So.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. These fields to me are really, kind of like big impact, strategic, bring that strategic value. Tony, I've got a little screen up here, some of your metrics. You want to just walk us through like some of the stuff that, for our audience here?
Yeah. So, these are our scores for overall candidate satisfaction. That's just how the candidates are feeling, just, what's their, I forget the actual questions in that, but it's, it's just very general general questions. The two, that I like to pay attention for, or actually, well, all of them, but, the next one, brand affinity, asking, how did you feel about Dent Wizard before you applied? How do you feel about Dent Wizard now that you've applied? How do you feel about Dent Wizard after you have interviewed? And it always goes, well, normally, knock on wood, always goes up. It should, Dent Wizard is, we say, we're the biggest company that, automotive company that no one's ever heard of, because we're business to business. And so as people come in, it's like, wow, we've never heard of you, to, wow, if I didn't get this job, I'd be devastated right now. So we see brand affinity go up. Interview satisfaction, recruiter satisfaction. Those are your, saying, okay, this is the experience I had with my recruiter, and this is the experience that I've had with my interviewers. Recruiter satisfaction is always higher than the managers, but I expect that. And then last is net promoter score, which is mainly driven, like Jenna had said, by that question: how likely are you to, recommend Dent Wizard to a family member or friend to come work for us? So.
Yeah, that's a good net promoter score, by the way. That's
Thank you.
Kind of off the charts. So, thank you for walking us through that with us. I'm going to move along here. I'm going to pass on this one. This isn't as important, but Workiva. This is the Jenna. This is the Workiva. I think you probably actually have additional ones. This is a bit of an older screenshot, but you can touch on these ones and then maybe some of the other ones that you have too.
Yeah, a lot of the similar ones that you aren't seeing here were on Tony's screen, but career site satisfaction, self-explanatory, simply tied to the career site survey. Recruiter satisfaction, again, that actually similar to Tony, not surprisingly, I'm sure to all of you, that recruiter satisfaction tends to be better than the hiring manager satisfaction. We do have a hiring manager satisfaction, and that NPS is actually one of the things that we look at the most. So
let me go to the next screen, because this is probably what you are more familiar with now, is being able to see a dashboard, from that hello to hire, and you can even see retire in the bottom three here. But this is kind of like a little more what the modern user interface is looking like. And so we can put these little dashboards up, and this is just one of our other clients where I grab their snapshot and put it up here so you can see like from the career site to phone screens to interviews to onboarding and all this kind of stuff. So it's just such a nice kind of way to present to your C levels, quickly at a glance, like, oh, look at my exit. Oh, well, okay, maybe that makes sense. They can't all be retiring, right? Some people have to be having a negative experience, I think, on their exit. So moving along here. So we're kind of running down to the end. I know I've kind of probably already burned up most of our time here, but I know we've covered a lot of this kind of stuff, some of our monthly management. Do one of you want to, maybe Jenna, you want to jump in and talk a little about some of the monthly managements that you guys do and who you present to, and what, I know you've touched along the way, but maybe just kind of jump in here.
Yeah, so we do, I personally do a weekly review, and I send up to our recruiting managers any feedback that I feel like is concerning and needs to be addressed ASAP, based on comments or feedback that's coming out. That could be from managers or recruiters. And then that gets captured more broadly in a monthly Survale report that I provide to all of our TA leadership across our metrics, how we're doing. I'll usually do a couple excerpts of like great comments, but also some like quick wins of feedback that we received and we were able to address. And then there's also a piece of that beyond the monthly Survale that goes into our quarterly recruiter KPI metrics. So kind of weekly, monthly, quarterly, right there.
That's great. Thank you. Tony, how about you?
Yeah, very similar. I will go in there weekly and give kind of breakdowns to my recruiting team. I can give it to the senior recruiter that I have to kind of let the rest of the team know how they're doing. I do have a weekly metric that I send out to the organizational leaders, kind of the RVPs and the operations guys. I like to include any, really, really good information and anything that came through that's really bad. So it's, it's not always the same. Sometimes there's, when it's stagnant for a few weeks, which is a good thing in a good place. I won't put it on there, but when I have some, really concerning fluctuations or some really good fluctuations, I let them know. And then, we go into the quarterly metrics as well.
Right. Cool. And then one of the last slides here, strategic management and strategic planning. I know, Jenna, you guys switched ATSs. We're not going to talk about what name brands or anything, but you switched ATSs. Did you were you able to was any of this kind of stuff a decision factor? Was it, hey, our previous ATS was too long, or, I don't know if any of that influenced it or not.
No, it didn't. In our case, our company had the choice to switch ATSs was primarily driven by the need for a new HRIS. And so the recruiting just kind of got lumped up into that. Yeah. But it has been something, I will say, that we have wanted to watch Survale even more closely during that transition to make sure that, which also happened to align with the global pandemic, to make sure that the candidate experience wasn't suffering because of our transition. Yeah. And so it was just something we just had extra eyes on, and it was a great resource for us as we shifted, and we knew that balls were getting dropped. We felt like hundreds of balls were getting dropped, but we wanted to see from the candidate's perspective, how are they experiencing it? Was it worse? Fortunately, we didn't have any major hiccups we didn't see come through in the candidate experience, but it was great assurance to our company and to our team that we were doing okay in the midst of what felt like just an insane lift as we transitioned.
That's really good. That's a really interesting kind of analysis of a use case of switching over, and have we gone backwards? Right? That's your worst fear.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we the same, or are we improving? So I'm glad to hear you haven't gone backwards. So that's fantastic. Tony, do you guys have any strategic usage and that you can talk about?
Well, we haven't gone through any big changes, but obviously we've done a lot with our branding in the last 2 years specifically. We launched a brand at the end of 2019 that didn't go over as well. I think part of it was the kind of the way it was launched. We didn't put enough behind it. And we saw that, on the numbers. And then we obviously launched a new one earlier this year, the Be a Wizard campaign. That definitely impacted. As we're going into 2021, we're doing a lot with social media and doing a big digital media, social media kind of strategy upgrade. And so we're definitely going to be watching for impacts on those things.
Yeah, great. I got a couple of little secret slides here. Diversity. So diversity and inclusion is probably, I know from the research that the Talent Board does, that a candidate experience is the #1 topic on minds of talent acquisition teams and HR. But #2 is D&I, diversity and inclusion. And I don't think either of you are doing this yet, but I think you're probably thinking about this. And because we already capture this data in your ATS, your EEO information, gender, race, ethnicity, veteran status, we're all of a sudden able to map satisfaction results of candidates, at whatever stage, back to their gender, for example. And then in this case here, what we're looking at is, do we have any adverse impact with our genders and our recruiting and manager team that are doing our interviews? And on a broad level here, you look and it looks pretty good. I think that this analysis right now is very broad based, but we're looking at a very 30,000 foot view here of one of our organizations. But you can actually drill into this data a little bit further and actually see well, wait a second, the aggregate data tells us it's okay. But if I drill in, there's actually one manager that, doesn't realize that he has adverse impact in his interviews. So I just wanted to touch on that, and then, obviously with race, this is another way of looking at diversity and inclusion. And, do we have any adverse impact, potential bias? So I think that this portion here is going to be one that I think all of the Survale clients are going to want to start reviewing. and analyzing and understanding going forward. So we've been sitting on this kind of analysis and analytics from day one. It's only taken us till now to like realize like, oh, we do have this and we can put this forward for our clients should they want it. So anyhow, I know I run up on our time here, you guys, and I really, again, I want to thank you so much. I love hosting these with you. They're so fun. They're just so easy and fluid. And I really, truly hope that our audience here has some questions and get something out of this as well. Any concluding comments you guys would like to part with?
I just say I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, you know, either in our Q&A following this or even following up after. So take note of our contact information, and I've been a source for many people who are looking at and interested in this sort of practice.
Fantastic.
Yeah, likewise, please feel free to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn. You know, I've been putting out, you know, I put out an article kind of at the beginning of this year about the story of Dent Wizard and the winning the Candidate Experience Award. And, you know, I've got some great feedback on it. So, you know, I'm going to probably put out another one here in the next coming months. But, you know, please feel free to reach out with any questions, anything.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys. And we'll take some questions now. Have a great day.
Woo.
Stop it.